Good morning. Um, Welcome to the First Kentucky Summit. And this is on the economic role of freight and modes. And we're going to be talking today about funding programs that support and impact ports. This is the funding session starting at 11 a.m. We'll just kind of go through these slides for getting started while people are still funneling in. We sure are happy that you all were able to make it, and we think we have a really exciting presentation from some great folks that do a lot for the ports, both in economic development and funding arenas. I'll be emceeing and providing a peer state review. That's coming in a little bit. But before we get started, while people are funneling in, just again, we're going to remind everybody that you have a mute button at the bottom of your screen. You would like to also mute your cell phone or put it on vibrate. That's helpful, especially if you're a speaker. We'd also remind you that you have a camera button. At the end, we're going to do more of a open style question and comment period. If you would type your comments in the chat, I would appreciate it, so that we can keep track of it, and also so you can remember what to ask. But we're going to ask at the end, when we have time remaining, as each of the presenters is going to try and stick to 15 minutes. We're going to hopefully have enough time for some really good feedback and commentary and maybe insight, as this is, like we've been saying, a work in progress. This is not the last summit, but more coming. So we want to add to the plan, make it better through y'all's insight and participation. If you see reactions, you can use all the ones that you want that are in there for fun. Try not to distract speakers, but if you like something you hear, feel free to use that as a nonverbal reaction. And also you can change your views if you'd like to be able to see speakers in a different way, or to be able to see the slides larger, if that's helpful to you. That being said, I'd like to introduce my distinguished panelists. I have Deborah Calhoun. She's a Senior Vice President from the Waterways Council, and I'll let her give you a little bit more of a bio in her presentation, which we'll switch to in a minute. And then I'm Jimmy McDonald. I'm working with the consultant team to produce the plan. One of my assignments is to look at the funding availability and needs for port projects at Kentucky's Riverports, and I'm looking at peer states and federal funding programs in that analysis. Today I'll be presenting mainly on peer states because others will be presenting on a lot of the federal programs. So Chad Dorsey is the Director of Inland Waterways Gateway Office right there in Paducah. So you got a very good resource nearby. And he is with MARAD. So, that is a big partner, especially for the Riverports and the Marine Highways programs. So these we hope will be very helpful and exciting presentations for you today. So moving forward, port funding programs. So Winston Churchill was once asked to cut funding to the classical arts to support the efforts of World War II, and he responded by saying, then what are we fighting for? And I think that's really important as we talk about funding today, just to kind of introduce that thought. What is it the ports are fighting for? What is it your job is trying to do? And I think that supporting your local communities, providing well-paying jobs for individuals, and seeing the movement of cargo and goods that support the rest of the country and international trade. So, as we go through this, I want everyone to remember what it is that we're fighting for. Our families, goods movements, and jobs, and economic development. So that being said, I'd like to take this opportunity I'm going to switch back over to Deborah Calhoun. So just give me a second as I transition to her presentation, which I hope I'll do a good job of. All right, is everybody seeing this now?
Yes.
Okay, Deborah, if you just let me know when you want to switch. Thank you.
Okay, great. I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to allow me and Waterways Council to be part of this summit. I always appreciate the chance to tell what WCI is up to and talk about the funding that we advocate for on the federal side to modernize the inland waterways system. Next slide. For those of you unfamiliar, just a quick note on who we are. We are the National Public Policy Organization. We're based in Washington, D.C. I'm actually based now here in Paducah as well. We advocate for a modern, well-maintained, efficient system of locks and dams on our inland waterways system. We actually represent a coalition of members and voices. As you can see the list, I won't run through it, but all told, this is a group that relies upon a viable and modern inland waterways transportation system. And so we always want to make sure that when we advocate, which I'll talk about in my next slide, we're coming at it from many different perspectives, talking about exports, importance to the nation in terms of jobs, talking about the sustainability of our inland waterways, the value of the port system, of organized labor to work with the Corps to build those locks and dams, and to all the commodities that are moving on the system. Next slide. Just want to sort of run through our three-pronged approach to advocacy. I am tongue-tied this morning. We directly lobby members of Congress, essentially to make sure that the Corps of Engineers has the highest level of funding that it can support for its work. That's full and efficient funding in our terms. The second is grassroots support. Our members across the country, they're the voters, so they can weigh in with those members of Congress and talk about the importance again from all of those voices in our coalition. And then the last is media and communications. We need to tell the story about, and it's a great story, about the importance of the inland waterway system and all the many beneficiaries that use this system, and why we need to make sure that it is viable and available for the future. Next slide. I won't read this slide to you, but it really is just a snapshot of the inland waterway system. Really shows its geographic, economic, and societal impacts. Lots of jobs there on the lower left. Safest and most energy efficient mode. A lot of our key commodities, coal and grain moving, and other energy products on our inland system. The value there as well, and the interconnectivity of those navigable waterways across all states. Next. I just use this slide to sort of point out those many beneficiaries. The waterways do benefit the entire nation. It's important to note, all of those listed here, that the only beneficiary that pays into a dedicated trust fund, and we, the commercial operators, pay a diesel fuel tax of 29 cents per gallon into a dedicated inland waterways fuel tax, inland waterways trust fund. These other beneficiaries do not pay into that trust fund for major rehab on the system and for new construction of locks. It's just worth noting, as I'll get into my presentation, that we're not suggesting that they do pay, but it's just important to note that we are the only sector, the commercial operators, that pay for the maintenance and new construction and modernization on the system. Next slide. So the other previous slides were sort of the good news part of the story. This is the not so good news of the presentation. 70% of our locks are past their 50-year design life. The average lock age, as you can see here, is 71. That single lock from the 0 to 9 up at the top is actually the Olmsted Lock and Dam, which for many, many years we talked about, when is that thing going to get finished? That's a project on the Ohio River that just opened back in 2018, but had sort of languished in the construction phase for over 30 years. And so one of the things that we try to do at Waterways Council is, in addition to getting the funding up there, full and efficient funding for the Corps, is to make sure that things stay on track and that they're built and constructed as efficiently as possible, because, you know, it's the United States. We can't have 30 and 40 years for these projects to be completed. Next slide. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Just a quick look at that first prong of our advocacy approach, our lobbying for full and efficient funding. This is a look at annual funding going back to fiscal year 12 for the Inland Waterways Trust Fund projects. As I said, the commercial operators pay a 29-cent per gallon diesel fuel tax that goes into an Inland Waterways Trust Fund. That is used to pay for 50% of new lock construction and major rehabilitation. It's then matched by general revenues, really to look at those other beneficiaries. That this is a system that benefits the entire United States of America, and so we're happy to pay for, you know, for up to half of the cost of modernizing it. As you can see, the president's budget request is the blue line. This has traditionally been, it doesn't matter which administration, if it's Dem or Republican, this is really an Office of Management budget release of the budget. And so as you can see, it's pretty flat line, and it's, you know, sunk incredibly low back in fiscal 19, jumped up a little bit and has gone down to 0. That's a goose egg 0 for construction requests in the FY21 budget from the Trump administration. The red line are the appropriated levels by Congress. So that's where Waterways Council goes in and says, you know, we are woefully underfunding our Corps of Engineers, and we will never in our lifetime build these projects and modernize this important system if we don't make sure that the Corps has the funding that it needs to be able to do its important work. So that's the direction we want to see is on the rise. You'll see back in 2019 where it falls off a bit. That's when the Olmsted project, as I mentioned, came online. There was a cost share change for that project. So we dropped down a little bit. We are operating right now on a continuing resolution until December 11th. Last week, however, you'll see the House number there. For energy and water development appropriations. Last week, the Senate finally released 12 of its appropriations bills, including energy and water development that funds the Corps. And their proposed level of funding is $7.72 billion. That's above the House's $7.63 billion and $1.76 billion above the FY21 request from the president. So, you know, pretty strong numbers thus far. Next slide. The one thing I want to mention is, in addition to looking at appropriations, we look at authorizations at Waterways Council, and our key policy bill is the Water Resources Development Act. This is a bill that happens every 2 years. There was a period between 2007 and 2014 that it did languish for 7 years. So we're happy to see that since 2014, it's back on a biennial every 2 year schedule. As I mentioned, currently the 50% cost share from Inland Waterways commercial operators into the trust fund is then matched by 50% from federal general treasury dollars. We are proposing that we conform and adjust that cost share in WRDA 2020 to, we initially had called for 75% general revenue from the government percent out of the trust fund and 25% out of the trust fund. We proposed that because in WARDA 2016, this change was made for another maritime sector in the deep draft navigation sector to really expedite and facilitate dredging and being prepared for those post-Panamax ships that would be plying our waters and our harbors. So that change has already been made in the inland sector. Currently, the proposal is agreed to in the House and in the Senate is 65% general revenue funds from our government and then 35% from the trust fund. I think there was a lot of support in the beginning for 75-25. The House has called for a 7-year sunset. The Senate has agreed to a permanent cost share change. But this was all sort of generally agreed to at 75-25 before COVID hit and all of the stimulus money that's been flying out the door. So next slide. Give a little more detail on this. So as I said, 65-35, 17 senators had requested that 75-25 and 78 House members had requested that 75-25. But again, currently where we are is 65-35. We really at Waterways Council prefer the Senate permanent cost share change and not the 7-year sunset. We'll see what happens. They are in negotiations on on the 2 versions of WARDA. We expect to see that get passed in the lame duck session of Congress before December 11th. So we remain really hopeful. And this would actually really inject quite a bit more of construction funding and more efficiency in the process. And in the end, we actually will save money in the process to finish these things off much, much faster over time than the current 50-50 split. Again, it's just important to remind you that of those beneficiaries, the commercial operators are the only ones that are paying that diesel fuel tax and at the table to negotiate this kind of thing. Next slide. Whoop. There we go. This is actually a good news chart. Operations and maintenance is the amount that's covered fully by the federal government. And so this looks at the full picture of operations and maintenance for the entire system. And so for the dredging program, for harbor maintenance improvements. And so as you can see, the blue line represents the president's budget, but it too has been very much on the rise back from fiscal 11 on this chart up to fiscal 21. But then the red line is the appropriated amount of money that we've been able to influence with our champions in Congress. And that too has been at historic levels, all the way up to $3.84 billion for operations and maintenance. The Senate request, as I said last week, was issued $3.78 billion. That's a little bit lower than the House, but it's an increase of $1.78 billion above the president's request. And just in in FY20, it was a $1.8 billion appropriated level above the administration's request of last year. So this is a really good news story, and this is the direction that we want to see this going. Next slide. The proof is in the pudding, and this is another good news chart from the Corps. This represents lock closures on main chambers, events that are lasting longer than 1 day. So these are not emergency outages, but ones that can be planned for, both scheduled and unscheduled, as you can see here. Going back to fiscal year 2000, the healthy influx of that historic level of operations and maintenance has really meant that emergency outages are going down significantly. And of course, it's also due to the Corps' great work working with the funds that they have available to maintain the system and keep it going under duress. And you'll note that fiscal 19 showed the slightest number of unscheduled outages since fiscal year 2005. And so that's a really good improvement. The money is going to where it needs to go, and the Corps is managing the system as efficiently as it possibly can. And so we like to see these kinds of numbers in this kind of direction. Next slide. One thing I want to bring to your attention is the National Waterways Foundation is the research arm of the Inland Waterways, and Waterways Council works very closely with the National Waterways Foundation. I actually serve as secretary of that organization, and just this year, we updated 17 inland waterways profiles. The one here that you're seeing is Kentucky's. And I think Haley and Jimmy have the PDF of this. And you can also find all of the states at nationalwaterwaysfoundation.org as noted here. We updated these profiles because back in 2013, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C., as it was preparing to go toward WRDA 2014, which was a really watershed event. As I said, there had been 7 years between WRDA bills at that point. So 2014 was a really big year for the WRDA policy bill. They had updated all 59, maybe it was 48 states looking at inland waterways and ports. And we used those for many, many years, but 2013, a lot has changed since then. So just in August of this year, the National Waterways Foundation has updated 17 state profiles. Specifically, we're looking less at ports and more at inland waterways, but you can see here they're looking at GDP, number of jobs, number of navigable miles across the state, the key industries and the value of those. And then on the back of the profile, it gives you general factoids about the national benefits of the inland waterways and how much it means to the country to have that as a transportation option, and for the lowest carbon footprint impact to the environment as well. So this is a great source. You all are welcome to use it and send it around as much as you need to. I think it's really helpful for state legislators as well, seeing just the impact and a lot of stuff that I'm sure they were unaware of right here in the state of Kentucky and elsewhere. Next slide. So I'm going to wrap it up in the interest of time here. Just a recap slide. Why is investment in the waterways so important? This mode is the most fuel efficient. It's the most environmentally friendly. We really prevent gridlock on our already congested highways. We are the most cost competitive mode for shippers, particularly for ag shippers, and we're having such a great harvest this year. So this is a two-way river. What's moving upriver is fertilizer and other chemicals and such for spring plantings, and then all that finished grain and soybeans and other materials moving downriver. And because it is the cheapest mode, that gets passed on to consumers like you and me. So that's really helpful. This does facilitate U.S. competitiveness in the nation. One of the things that the foundation is looking to do is a study on looking at sort of three things in terms of U.S. competitiveness. What is the U.S. spending for its waterways infrastructure? We know that number fairly well. And so also looking at what other countries are spending on their waterways, and then what countries are spending on other countries. For example, what is China spending in Brazil to get a leg up on U.S. competitiveness? And of course, we have the capacity on the inland waterways as well that the other modes do not have, to the degree. So that's it for me. I'll take any questions in the chat and we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. We did have a poll question. We got a couple polling questions we wanted to run real quick. And Haley, can you launch that, or do I need to launch that? Oh, there it is. If you guys would answer this poll question, is to make sure that we're all being involved. And I want you to answer as if you didn't know much about it from the beginning of her thing, not from everything she just told you. So, but we're trying to gauge what we're learning through these events. So it looks like about a 50-50 there, Deb. So and now there's a couple more coming in. All right. We're gonna have to end the voting so that there's not additional votes thrown in there. As you see the results, there we go. So we're looking around it's pretty 50-50. So, I think one opportunity, and I've looked through a lot of them in my research, are those one pagers that Deb was showing you, the one for Kentucky. That she has them for all the major member ports, which are a lot of your regional states around you, and a lot of the waterway states that you interact with, that you compete with. So some good resources there, and I would encourage you to dig into that and get some more information on that. So Deb, we really appreciate you providing this, and if you'll hold on for some questions at the end, and if y'all have questions, just put in the chat box now so that we can get to them at the end, and just make sure that that you say that this one's for Deb or this one's for all three of us, if you don't mind. I'm going to switch over to the other presentation, hopefully smoothly, and it looks like I did. So I'm going to pull down this chat thing here, and let's see if this works. All right, now I got to move through a few slides because it just the way it worked. But today, what I'm going to be presenting is a look at some of those surrounding states we just described. That there's some real nice profiles from the Waterway Council on, but we're going to be looking at what are the funding programs that these states provide? What is Kentucky competing against? What are the Riverports in Kentucky having to try and attract new business, new customers, and develop infrastructure and repair and maintain
We're having some technical difficulties with Jimmy's audio.
Yeah, bear with us for one moment.
We like Chad to pull up his presentation.
I'd be glad to.
Good.
If you all are wanting to do that.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Let's go ahead and do. Yeah.
Yeah, if you could go ahead and present, we'll just
We'll watch for Jimmy to come back in the meeting.
Yeah.
I'll try and share my screen here.
Perfect.
If you all would let me know if you can see the screen.
We
Yep,
can
looks
see
good.
it.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. Certainly glad to be here today. My name is Chad Dorsey. I'm representing the Maritime Administration. Let me just check and see how I have to flip sides here. So the Maritime Administration is a modal department of the U.S. Department of Transportation. We're led by Elaine Chow, currently the Secretary of Transportation, and our Maritime Administrator is Admiral Mark Busby. Our mission at MARAD is to foster and promote the U.S. Merchant Marine and the American maritime industry to strengthen the maritime transportation system, which I like to say includes the IMTS, or the Inland Marine Transportation System, to include landside infrastructure, shipbuilding and repair, and also labor to meet the economic and national security needs of the nation. So we have, the Maritime Administration has 10 gateway offices around the country. And if you see in the middle section there, the purple section, that's considered the Inland Waterways Gateway region. It's made up of 25 states, I believe. I represent, or my office represents, 9 of those states along the Ohio River, the Tennessee and Cumberland, and then down the lower Mississippi from Cairo down to Memphis, and then the Arkansas River as well. I have a colleague who is in the St. Louis office who represents everything north and west to include the Columbia Snake River out west. So some of our responsibilities as Inland Waterways Gateways, we do everything concerned with inland marine transportation, ports, intermodal connectivity, vessel operators, service providers, and marine security. And again, my office, the Inland Waterways Gateway office for my region, is located right in Western Kentucky in Paducah. That office was established 2 years ago. We had the Secretary of Transportation come to Paducah and announce the formation of the office. Previously, there was just one Inland Waterways Gateway office in St. Louis. But our gateway directors around the country are experts on all regional and local maritime issues. This includes disaster recovery, financing for port infrastructure that we'll talk about today, marine highway development that we'll also talk about today, and support for American shipbuilding companies. So this slide is what I like to call the impact slide. And by that, I mean federal investment in from the MARAD, or through the Maritime Administration, both from MARAD and through USDOT. So this chart just shows the breadth of infrastructure investment from USDOT into the ports and waterways industry. And of course, it needs to be a little bit updated, but that'll be forthcoming. So when we talk about Department of Transportation funding really for the inland industry or the maritime industry, there's some overarching USDOT federal grant assistance programs that MARAD works to bring to stakeholders. And then MARAD has some of its own more funding programs, which I'll talk about both. But most of you may or may not be familiar with, or probably are familiar with, 2 main USDOT federal programs. The BUILD program, which is the Better Utilizing Investments to Leverage Development. That is a extremely large, very subscribed program. Last year, FY20 was $1 billion. And then also the INFRA program, Infrastructure for Rebuilding America program, which was over $900 million for fiscal year 20. Of course, both of those programs have closed and awards have went out. But these programs typically are funded annually, and we would expect, all things going well, that in 2021, you'll see these programs as well. And we have ports within Kentucky, certainly, that have utilized these programs. So Owensboro, Kentucky had a BUILD grant. The city of Paducah had a BUILD grant, and these are your larger programs, roughly, in the $10 million range, sometimes significantly more if you talk about larger ports on the coast. But certainly potential federal investment for stakeholders in Kentucky. A newer program on the bottom there, the PIDP program, or Port Infrastructure Development Program, is a new program, or newer program, which had funding in fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20. Initially, that program, when it came out, was for coastal seaports, and it was exceeded 200 million in FY19. In FY20, they included more ability for inland ports to be able to subscribe to that program. That program was at 225 million, and that program we expect potentially will continue for FY21. That is a fantastic grant program to apply to from an inland perspective, as it's a little bit less subscribed than, say, your build or infra programs, and really more directed to port infrastructure. Moving past that slide, please hold. There we go. So that is the more USDOT program-wide programs. The America's Marine Highway Program is really more dedicated from the Maritime Administration standpoint. It's a smaller program as far as total funding. Typically, annual funding lately has been coming in around 9 to 10 million. And this program, the benefit of this program is it's certainly much less subscribed than your overall USDOT federal assistance programs or federal grant programs. Whereas the America's Marine Highway Program really makes a lot of sense for the inland river system. It includes all of the waterways, rivers, and we have coastline and Great Lakes projects. It expands navigable waterways, to reduce highway congestion and air pollution. So really the benefits of this program are to get trucks off the road, bring freight to the inland river system. As Deb mentioned previously, the inland waterways has ample room for more freight. And this is a way also, this America's Marine Highway Program, to capture the benefits of being the mode that's more environmentally friendly than say air than truck or rail, being the waterways industry. So the goal of the program is to provide new economically sustainable supply chain alternatives. And really it's a three-step process, and the next 3 slides I'll get into a little more detail, but the 3 steps are to designate the marine highway route, designate a marine highway project, and finally the 3rd step is to apply or get marine highway grants in the program. So establishing marine highway route is step 1 of the marine highway program. Really the majority of marine highway routes have already been established. There are some rivers or specific reaches of rivers that we will potentially be adding. The Marine Highways program just has added some more islands to the mix as well. But as far as the inland river system, as an example, for the Ohio River, that's considered the M70, which is already designated. So shippers, ports, really any stakeholder that has to do with the river system can apply to a project with a public sponsor, if they're on the M70 or that project's on the M70 or encompassing, say, the lower Mississippi River, the M55, et cetera. So the second step in the process is to achieve a project designation or submit a project designation application. And these project designation applications really are a detailed view of a service, a marine highway service that is meant to reduce truck traffic or bring that potential movement to the river system. So the project designation process really, as an example, I think the best way to kind of describe it would be the latest M70 project that received funding, and we'll get into some of the Kentucky projects. But the Corba, or the Central Ohio River Business Association, publicly sponsored a project that had to do with multiple stakeholders to include Nucor as the shipper to remove trucks that were carrying steel products or steel coils by truck to barge to increase barge movements. And they had achieved some funding, and there's other stakeholders that achieved funding as well through that marine highway project designation. Again, that needs to be approved by the Secretary of Transportation. Once a project is approved by the Secretary of Transportation, multiple stakeholders can apply for marine highway grants within that project. And just as a note, Mr. Tim Pickering is on the line as well. He won't be presenting today. I'm presenting his area of expertise here. But just from headquarters perspective, Tim Pickering is our main contact. Everyone will, all of our stakeholders will come through the Inland Waterways Gateway office to me, and then I will evaluate projects and work towards connecting you as the stakeholder with the proper programs or proper personnel. So again, recent program funding within the Marine Highways program. It's a fantastic program. You can see Paducah, McCracken, Riverport has worked to develop a container on barge service and receive some early funding. Again, they have worked to identify potential areas where they can move to a container on barge service and have received the ability to work towards funding towards making that happen. And then again, in FY20, you can see 9.775 million was advertised, and we had 2 projects to do with the M70 Ohio River, and a few of the, you can see a few of the stakeholders involved in those projects. But really, it's a timely process to get through the project designation process to be approved by the secretary. But once you are, it's a very small pool of potential applicants that can apply for grant funding within that program. If I'm not mistaken, I think we're just around 35 eligible projects right now that can apply for funding within those project designations. So just a couple of the other highlighted programs, and I know I'm probably taking a little more time than we have here, but just quickly wanted to mention the Port Conveyance program. This is a program where federally owned real estate are no longer used by federal government and can be made available for state and local governments, regional agencies, or nonprofit organizations to develop that property towards marine industry related purposes. So as you can see from this map, we've had quite a few port conveyance processes achieved. There is an additional one in Memphis that's not currently shown on this chart, but always something to keep in the back of your mind as you're looking at potential port projects. Another smaller program, again, MARAD led, is the Small Shipyard Grant Program. It's been at about 20 million per year. Many stakeholders in Kentucky have made use of this program to improve their facilities or equipment for their facilities as far as shipbuilding or repair are concerned. So those are your main grant programs. The federal government does have financing programs for port infrastructure projects as well. This is led by the Build America Bureau. You'll see highlighted down there, Mr. Kirk Clausen. He's our representative in DC to access this program. And I'm not sure that we've had Kentucky stakeholders participate in this program as of yet, but certainly there are Inland Waterways stakeholders that are involved. The kind of 3 main programs are the TIFIA program, which is the Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. The RIF program, the Railroad Rehabilitation and Improvement Financing Program. They also have just come out with a RIF Express program that moves these projects faster. And then also there's private activity bonds as well, available as well. So this is just a quick shot of the different programs. Again, what I would like to leave you here with today is that your Inland Waterways Gateway office right here in Western Kentucky is available to all stakeholders, folks with interest, anyone who would like to learn more about the administration or grant and financing programs that are available to you. I'm certainly glad to take your calls and connect with you, and look forward to potentially, I know I've worked with a majority of folks on the call, but I thank you for the time today. And again, happy to answer any questions at the end. Haley, I do believe we had one, I forget what it's called. Oh, there we go. One chat question here for you all to get a gauge of how many folks were aware of our Inland Waterways Gateway office here in Paducah, Kentucky, previous to our meeting today. I'm hoping to achieve at least 50% like Deb had. We got a little bit of a contest here, Deb. Let's see. Looks like you're winning at the moment, but it's close.
We could have a recount though, Chad.
There you go. There you go. I think we should stay away from that, Deb.
Yes.
I'll accept defeat in this one, but
It appears you're a hanging Chad.
I'm a hanging Chad today.
No
yeah.
pun intended.
So I almost got to you, Deb. I'm almost halfway, and looks like I have a little more work to do.
Yeah.
But again,
They were pretty evenly matched there.
just comes back to the fact that I'm here and I'm a resource for all and located here for your needs. So appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Chad, thank you. And I would like to also say thank you for rescuing me. I had some technical difficulties, but I think we've recovered from that, I hope. I have a polling question as well. It might be a good time to just go ahead and launch mine, Haley, to get it get everybody woke back up since I fell off. And then all right, so mine is going to be used a little bit more for understanding how we direct needs and as it relates to your biggest challenges when it comes to funding. And this one's going to be a little more difficult for people to figure out, but hopefully useful. Okay, I'll give you about 5 more seconds to answer. All right, so we got the results in. Looks like matching requirements is what becomes a big challenge, and hopefully, I've spoken to several of the port directors and several of the different funding stakeholders, and as I reach back out and we begin to wrap up our section as it relates to funding, we'll definitely be looking into that. So I'm going to go back and go ahead and share my screen and try to get caught back up here to where I was slide wise. Is my screen sharing?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
You just need to do full
Yes.
screen.
All right. Second. There we go. So as we get caught up here, I was talking about Kentucky.
Jimmy,
when I got
switch.
cut up, I think.
Jimmy, switch your screens.
How do I do that?
Go up to display settings, right there.
Thank you. Swap.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
There you go.
Thank you. So you guys can see I'm technology challenged. But as we went through, we looked at the different funding programs and do this peer state review. And Kentucky, has been receiving funding through the cabinet since 2013. The state, through legislative statute, developed, and y'all are pretty much aware of this, but some of the stakeholders on the call that we may be interacting with may not be. But the state, through statute, developed a trust fund that can receive funding, different types of funding, either through federal, state, or contributions, gifts, or donations. And that trust fund allows the state to contribute their funding pot, which has been on average around $500,000 a year. And we have different breakouts of the funding, as you can see in 2021, $450,000 allocating to 5 projects. 2020 had 7 projects. A little bit more money was put into the pot. And you can see we have this all broken out through all the different funding years. And you can see the ports that have received funding and the number of projects that they've received over the past since 2013 through the 2021 fiscal years. So that's just a quick breakdown of the existing state funds that Kentucky is providing from a port-specific standpoint. To get more into the peer state review, I just wanted to show you the states that we looked at that we thought had some, interesting funding programs that were either in or around Kentucky, had, similar types of activities, similar types of state government. And we also included Florida and Virginia. Virginia also having some interaction with Kentucky, but Florida with some innovative funding programs and many years of history of developing a port-specific program may provide some best practices to look into. Port funding programs in Ohio, they recently invested $23 million, and this is going to leverage a $90 million waterway infrastructure improvement program. And the first years are going to be in 2020, $11 million in projects. And in the second year, 2021 fiscal year, funding over $12 million. So the state has developed this. This will fund over 13 projects, 5 public port authorities. And it's really helping Ohio to leverage those local dollars to do needed infrastructure improvements. The benefit is a major funding dollars. There's a good solid match on the programs, and there's 3 projects per port in the state on average, which lets them get their top tier and middle tier funding requirements met. I wanted to show the deficiencies, but I'll talk about it here. Indiana is having a pretty much not a state program right now. They did receive a MERAD grant, which Chad was describing that program for y'all. It's a $4 million grant for a new bulk storage facility, and that's going to include an 84,000 square foot warehouse on a 1.6 acres footprint. And in 2017, they also received a $9 million fast lane grant. So Indiana's done a good job of leveraging some of the federal funding programs, but they're not so much have a fixed program at the state level, which we believe is important to help the ports, be able to leverage their local dollars and also to provide a state local match against federal funding when available possible. There is not a long-term resolution in place, and there is no fixed capital programs that I've been able to find to date. Now, I am reaching out to different DOTs to see if I can dig a little deeper and make sure I'm not missing anything. Went the other way. Illinois has a new program that's called Rebuild Illinois Fund, and this is a state program. It's a fast-track public infrastructure program, and it's a pretty large amount of money that they're putting into the pot. $150 million appropriation specific for the Illinois ports. The overall program is a 6-year program for the state, and it's going to be close to $33 billion program. They have a 50-50 matching requirement. I'm having trouble with the clicker here. They have and they also have a $1 billion allocation to port or to rail specific improvements, which has a port component to it and a port overlap for connecting spurs and what have you. There's a $40 million allocation also from their 2020 fund that's going specific to develop a new port there called Port Cairo, which y'all are probably pretty familiar with. This is an enormous statewide investment. That's a benefit. It's multimodal. It has a significant amount of funds also on the highway and rail components, which also provide crossover to their port from a freight movement perspective. Oh my goodness. Are we still with you? My screen just went black, so I apologize. Of all days to have such technical difficulties, I apologize. And then the shortfalls, as they have 19 ports to spread it across, and that's a lot of ports, and it's also not a fixed program. It's only a 6-year program, so it has a sunset. Looking into Missouri, they are providing $1 million appropriation to Missouri ports. These funds must be used for a transportation purpose other than highways. So it's good that it is a specific funding pot for intermodal facilities, including ports, rail hubs, terminals, inland terminals. It does have a good matching to an 80-20 figure. And they have a 500,000 per project maximum, which means that that they can't give it all away to one project in a given calendar year. And it must be completed within a 1-year period of time, which is a lot like our economic development programs within Kentucky. The positive side of it is it's multimodal. It provides help and gains to the ports, and it has a low matching requirement. The shortfalls are many of the ports have a very little money to be able to compete, and the modes the modes are not the only method that they can receive that funding, and it doesn't have a continuing resolution or a state mandate on that. Looking at Florida, Florida is a kind of a different animal. As you know, it has been kind of organized since the early 90s with their FSTED program. Statutorily, though, what the FSTED program did that helped Florida so much is that they got statutory annual funding requirements that come directly out of the trust fund for the state's transportation Department of Transportation. So $100 million annually has to be directly go to port funding. And that's broken down as such. 25 million goes to the FSTED Council, which is a private entity, a public-private entity that sits as a manager of those funds and a distributor of those funds. And they 35 million of that money goes from the SPY grant program, which is actually like an intermodal program. Where they have about a $400 million pot for all different types of intermodal projects, but ports receive 35 guarantee out of that. And then they have debt service on their bond programs, which is about 25 million for some older bonds from the 90s, and then 10 million from a very recent bond issuance, which that money, that 10 million, gave them access to $150 million of bond funds that were immediately available to the ports in one given year. And they also have a $5 million intermodal logistics program, which is like for inland port facility development. What the benefits of Florida is that they have a dedicated long-term funding guarantee in statute. It has to be, the whole state statute would have to be repealed for these funding sources to not get funded. And they also have multimodal funding, so it's diversified. They're not just getting port-specific funds that go to the ports, but they have intermodal logistics funds. They have the SPY funds, which is through their strategic intermodal system. And the other thing is that they had lower matching requirements on like dredging programs and berths and stuff, 75-25, 50-50 on remaining projects. And then their shortfalls are there's 15 ports, so they have a large capital budget with aging infrastructure. Tennessee DOT doesn't have any major port funding from the state level. They have a couple of programs that are rail related that the ports can benefit from. That they have a $10.3 million rehab, and for short lines and dedicated rail funding that connects 2 ports. And then they have a larger pot for the Class 1 railroads of $42 million. The port has received a recent build grant. The Tennessee Economic Development Community Development Council was able to go in for the Port of Kate's Landing and get a $7 million build grant. So they have a good partnership with their economic development, which helped them leverage some federal funding. They do get funding through Tennessee Tom Bigby Waterway Authority. I'm still digging into that a little bit more to get exactly what type of fundings the different ports can receive. However, there is 28 ports within the waterway system, so there's a lot of ports to spread that funding across. Lastly, the Port of Virginia. The Virginia DOT has a $42 million annual budget trust fund that funds directly to ports. So they have a pretty large budget allocation directly out of their DOT. 5 million annual allocations to the Port of Virginia program that is specific for them to be able to attract public-private partnerships. 500,000 of that can go to any qualifying applicant, and up to 2 million annually for multiple projects or interconnected projects. It has a pretty good matching requirement depending on the way that the project is developed. It can either be 50-50 or even an 80-20 match. Sorry about that, jumped on me. And then they also have a really good tax incentive program for barge and rail users, which I know that there are some opportunities for that with the Kentucky ports as well. The benefits are the port has dedicated annual multi-year funding, kind of like Florida. The Port Authority, at the Port Authority level and at the DOT level. So the Port Authority, it's a state Port Authority, has annual funding allocations, and so does the Department of Transportation. They also have low matching requirements, and they allow for public-private applications where they are able to help their users and their tenants to develop their projects or attract new customers and new businesses because of that capability that they provided in that $5 million POV funding program. So they have innovative funding and they have tax breaks for users and operators. So that is the benefits that Virginia provides. The shortfalls is their application process. The state also having such a large funding pot picks winners and losers, and sometimes that can impact smaller ports. And then there's also many terminals so that the funding gets spread out quite a bit, creating lower funding as it relates to that. So this moves us into our question and comments period. Wanted to encourage you to take, we still have some time, Haley?
Yeah,
Still
we have
about
about
15 minutes?
maybe 10 minutes.
10 minutes now? Okay.
Yeah,
So we have about 10 minutes. I wanted to see if people would turn on, video, and if not video, we would open up and have more of a town hall style. So, if you want to come off mute, I'm going to let Haley first start with a few of the questions that are in the chat. See if Chad or Deborah want to participate in answering those, or myself if I can, and then we'll just open it up for additional questions after Haley finishes that.
Sure. A couple of the questions have already been answered in the chat, so I'm going to skip around a little bit. First one, build and infra are solicited and competed at the departmental level. Is the PIDP solicited and competed by MERAD?
Chad, you're on mute.
Chad?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sorry, I had to call in by phone here. I'm double tasking here, but the PIDP program is all programs are really through USDOT, but MERAD coordinates specifically the PIDP program as well as the Maritime Highway Program or Marine Highway Program. So they are naturally subscribed, but really led by MERAD, but ultimately USDOT, the Secretary's office makes all final decisions.
We have a couple comments. Let's see, it looks like Stacy's from Missouri, and she says, we also have a small amount that we provide for port admin funds and small amounts of capital funds for the ports. I work for the MODOT Waterways program. Freight enhancement is for private and public projects. She also said, please let James know that I can give additional information on what Missouri has. He only has information on one of the programs. We actually have 3 that provide funds for the ports. I think that's for you, Jimmy.
Yeah, and I would appreciate that if we can, if I can get your contact information or your email, I'll reach out to you. Thank you.
Terrific. That's pretty much the end of the chats over there. Deb's already answered a couple in the sidebar. So if anybody else has any questions that they'd like to ask the panel, feel free to unmute yourself or even turn your video on and come join us.
Just a question in general. Anybody wants to field it is fine. So far as what I would call the P3 participation in grant applications and grant awards, any feel as to the percentage of P3s that might be involved in these grant awards as far as the match?
Greg, are you referring to like some of these federal programs?
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen, and I've done a pretty extensive review of the Build Tiger grant program. And I think that in some cases that does lend to a, when there is a combined effort to leverage funds from the private and the public, and it increases the match, it does give benefit to, I believe, to applications being successful. Also, where states, DOTs have been able to have a coordinated effort, either across state lines or multi-county, multi-city, multi-jurisdiction applications get a lot of focus, and that's what I've seen just from my review. You know, so a lot of the ones that I see in there that have that are getting accepted. So, but those are also more challenging ones to do, as you. So that's my answer. Anybody else got any comment on that?
Yeah, this is Travis Fleck from the Maritime Administration. I would just echo that, you know, every notice of funding opportunity describes the scoring process, but of the, you know, of the money that's been awarded for the discretionary grant programs, that's leveraged an additional, usually $1 to $2 of non-federal funds, and a large portion of those are from private sector as well as public sector. So just look at the NOFOs especially, but I would agree that it usually it's part of the NOFO that it has a benefit in the scoring process.
Travis.
Thank you, Travis.
Yeah, if I could, you know, there's a lot of times that some of the ports in Kentucky can apply for EPA grants as well for machine replacements. Basically, most of the ports, I'd say, east of the Tennessee River fall under that category. Some may or may not, I don't know, but it's with the replacement of aged equipment with newer equipment. And you know, that's one I'll tell you right now, the Port of Virginia utilizes quite often. If you look at it, I think they probably received about $8-9 million worth of equipment over the years just from that EPA grant. And basically, I can't remember how it works, but you have to be a containment area or non-containment area, and I get confused which one's which. But if you have if you meet the EPA standards for considered a poor air quality area, then you can apply for those, and that takes some of the money off. And I hate to say it, but it kind of frustrates me when people utilize the marine aspect or the maritime funding which they have the right to do those kind of equipment replacements when they can in turn go against the EPA, which will offer more money to the entire state of Kentucky or on the Riverport side from the MARAD side. I guess to open up opportunities that way. But, you know, there's all kind of federal funding that can be gotten and given and what have you on that side that really, I think, I was hoping that we can get some kind of way that this would at least list every place that would look at it, that we wouldn't avoid any of them.
Yeah, Bill, and just I'll respond to that. We are doing a comprehensive look at all the different funding programs available. Just with the time we had today, felt it was, you know, a good opportunity to talk about what the other states are doing around you. It seemed like an area of interest from a lot of the port directors. But we are looking at grants like DERA and other EPA style grants as well. And those are good opportunities for users of the waterway and even the ports themselves to convert older equipment and upgrade equipment. Many of those grants provide funding, and also Port Security Grant Program provide funding for generators to be brought on board that are clean burning and have multi-fuel capabilities. They also provide opportunities for, like you said, to convert equipment like diesel burning cranes, diesel burning rail, if you have switcher engines on your facility, or trucks that you may be using for drayage or other port-owned equipment. Even some funds even allow you to convert port vehicles to like electrified vehicles. So yeah, I'll give you an overview, as many of the programs as I can find as we dig into it, and have discovered several of those, and there are very some good resources out there to provide some help on that.
Right, and also too, I mean, I don't like to even see the EPA modified. I mean, the expense of the equipment's gone up so much with all the different technologies and stuff like that, that it makes no sense to me that where I'm located, I can burn a pollutant machine because I have clean air, but you know, and pay the full cost of it, or buy a machine that's basically unaffordable, unattainable to sustain an operation with. So, I mean, you know, there needs to be some kind of flux in the EPA on that side of it. Either we're all going to burn clean burning equipment and receive the same benefits, or you're never going to solve the problem. That's simple. But anyhow, I'll shut up. Thanks, guys.
No, that's good information. I'll make sure to incorporate that into any of my discussions on next steps for the ports.
Jimmy, we're about out of time. If you want to.
Yeah, I see that, and I think it went really well. I appreciate it, even with all the glitches but could be expected in this COVID environment. So I appreciate y'all being patient and being able to quickly adjust, and hopefully you guys receive something out of this. And in the end, we will take your comments, and your questions, and we will incorporate those into our findings and next steps as we finish up this section as it relates to funding practices, funding availability for Kentucky in the Riverports. So we really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, and thank you very much. And we hope that you guys have a good day as you move into other sessions. And I can spin up real quick just to give everyone a reminder. Sorry about having to scroll through all these.
No,
But at 1 to 2 today, just as a reminder, you'll have the port interactions and logistics. So get some lunch, take a break and stretch, and then we'll see you back in about an hour. Is that right, David?
that is correct.
45 minutes.
All right. Thank
There
you
you go.
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.